Live. I'm gonna check Facebook and YouTube to make sure that that is the case. Yep, we're live. So when you get in, do me a favor and just drop who you are in the chat and say hello or something, because I cannot see names unless you do that. So let me know you're here. Like that. Hey, Lex. Thank you for joining today. Hey, Auntie Sylvia. Well, I don't see you, you see me, but good to know that you're here, So if you can, share the video on, your social media so that we can, get the word out to as many people as possible. And as soon as I finish sharing all the stuff, then we'll get started. All right. All right, there we go. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Brief introduction. My name is Javon Bracey. I'm the founder and curator of the Purpletuity Project, which is a lupus awareness and advocacy organization. I was born and raised in New Orleans, and I currently reside in Denver. I'm a minister at a church here, and I also do some contract-based and project-based work with faith-based and community-based organizations. I was myself diagnosed with lupus in 2016, about a year before relocating here to Denver. And I started the Purpletuity Project last spring as just a passion project centering lupus awareness and advocacy. So since May is Lupus Awareness Month, I wanted to use the community that I've been working to cultivate to just raise our consciousness. So I started this series, Live at 5, where I'll go live at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, the forgotten time zone, to engage with the community about lupus-related topics. And so today we will talk about the impact of lupus and specifically focus on race, gender, and economics. So as I have done each week, I want to begin with a disclaimer that I am not a doctor. I am not a medical professional, not a nurse, anything like that. This information has come from my own personal experience, as well as research from organizations like the Lupus Foundation of America, the Lupus Research Alliance, and other researchers and things like that, which I'll kind of illuminate a little bit more as we go along. So please subscribe, please like, please share, comment. Like I said, drop a comment to let me know you're here once you get here. And if you have any questions, definitely drop them in the comments as we go along, and I'll periodically come back to check them out. Hey, everybody. Good to see y'all. Well, again, see your names. That's awkward. Anyway, so episodes 1, 2, and 3 are still available on YouTube. They're still available on Facebook, and I also transferred them to Instagram. So I definitely encourage watching those, but I do want to begin with a recap. Lupus is a chronic and complex autoimmune disease. Of course, chronic just means it's ongoing and continuous. And with any autoimmune disease, the antibodies that your body is supposed to produce to attack infection and injury are actually attacking healthy tissue. So this manifests as inflammation, joint pain, skin rashes, sensitivity to light, extreme fatigue, fevers, as well as problems with kidneys, lungs, and the brain. There's no one test to diagnose lupus. You get a diagnosis by a combination of tracking those various signs and symptoms, as well as taking blood and urine tests and doing a physical examination with a specialist. There are times, even after one is diagnosed, that one might experience an increase in the severity of symptoms, and that's called a lupus flare. Flares can last for days or even weeks. They can be triggered by weather stuff, so sunlight, pressure or temperature changes, air quality, things like that, as well as emotional stress and physical stress on your body. There are several types of prescription medications that are used to treat lupus. The big categories are NSAIDs. You can get those over the counter like Aleve and Advil, immunosuppressants, antimalarials, corticosteroids, and biologics. Things like diet and exercise can also be helpful in mitigating some of the symptoms. And we also talked a little bit last week about cannabis and the ongoing research specifically tied to relief from pain and inflammation, which are two of the main ways that lupus impacts the body. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in and dropping those comments in. So as we proceed, I want to begin today's conversation about the impact of lupus by sort of setting the stage. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the result of the racial disparities within America's healthcare industrial complex. David R. Williams, who is a social scientist at Harvard, stated, "Many Americans are shocked by the data emerging from multiple cities showing the disproportionate overrepresentation of African Americans and even some Latinos in terms of COVID-19 mortality. The striking disparities we're seeing are not the fault of individuals, families, and communities that are experiencing them. Instead, they reflect longstanding policies that have created pervasive social and economic inequalities in the United States." I venture to suggest that by many Americans, he really means white Americans, because even if we don't have the fancy terminology to describe it, this is something that we as people of color, as Black people, we've been knowing, right? America's healthcare industrial complex is filled with racism and implicit bias and cultural incompetence. And all of that is backed up by anecdotal evidence, like individuals who have stories about what they have experienced, as well as data. So therefore, many Black Americans have also developed a distrust in the system because it has been violent and abusive toward them as individuals and their family members, as well as their ancestors. So two of the most egregious examples of that include the father of gynecology, who conducted research on enslaved women's bodies without anesthesia, and the Tuskegee experiment, which withheld treatment for syphilis from patients who hadn't even properly consented to participation. And if you're interested in kind of delving more into that topic, I recommend a book called Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. It really kind of goes into those topics really deeply. So the reality is that all of those compounding inequalities have long led to Black Americans experiencing disproportionately high incidences of chronic health conditions, and lupus is no exception. Women comprise 90% of the people living with lupus, and lupus is 2 to 3 times more likely to affect Black women and other women of color, Asian women, Hispanic and Latino women, Pacific Islander women, Native American women, 2 to 3 more times likely to affect women of color than it is to affect white women. And not only are the incidences higher, but the cases are often more severe. So there was a study conducted by researchers at the University of Michigan and published in the Journal of Arthritis and Rheumatism that analyzed data from about 2.4 million participants. The data showed that lupus affected 1 in 537 Black women, compared with 1 in 1,153 white women. It also showed that Black women were more likely to be diagnosed with lupus at a younger age and during childbearing years. Black women also had higher rates of serious health complications, such as kidney failure and neurological problems. For Black women, peak risk of developing lupus occurred in young adulthood, while the risk of disease among white women was spread out more evenly through mid-adulthood. And this occurrence during young adulthood has significant implications for childbearing and risk in pregnancy, and also leads to a higher burden of health issues over the patient's entire lifespan. So getting diagnosed at 24, like I did, versus beginning to see and I began to see symptoms a little bit earlier than that, as early as 21, versus not seeing symptoms until 40, means a higher burden of health issues and also impacts on childbearing years. So that's just a little bit of data about gender and about race, especially when it comes to lupus. So you may be asking, why do women get autoimmune diseases like lupus far more often than men? And why are Black women dealing with lupus more likely than any other demographic to be dealing with lupus? And the short answer is we still don't know, unfortunately. So further research is necessary, as not as much is known about what causes lupus in general. So there is still a lot of research being done about literally what causes lupus. There are many proposed reasons that are being looked into, like hormones. But some of the data I've looked at said that, okay, if estrogen causes lupus, then more women would have it, or every woman would have it, as this is a hormone that they all have. So there's a lot of research that's still being done because scientists are still looking for what those links are. And again, if you are interested in some of that specific research that goes into those topics more deeply, you can find it on the Purpletuity blog post that is about this topic. So there are some really helpful links there. And just a note on research, I'm a part of an initiative facilitated by the Delta Research and Educational Foundation, DREF, and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, that's seeking to increase African-American participation in biomedical research. So unlike with something like the Tuskegee experiment, where there was not proper consent that was being given, this initiative really does empower the patients, empower participants to get information about their health and to contribute to the larger pool of data and research. So if you or someone you know may be interested in that, or research specific to lupus, I know there's an organization called the National Lupus Patient Registry, or NLPR, that is conducting research that is specific to lupus. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out and I can connect you to that information and make sure that you get that. So yeah, check the comments. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you like and share and all that good stuff so we can continue to spread the word about what we are doing. So given the circumstances that I mentioned, the lupus community must continue to amplify the voices and experiences of Black women and of women of color. So as I've shared my own experiences as a lupus patient who identifies as a Black woman and navigating various healthcare systems, trying to get a diagnosis, and even after, all those things fueled my desire to begin curating the Purpletuity Project and to giving voice to some of those conversations. In the stories of these women, in the stories of these people with lupus, who are people of color, who are impacted disproportionately by these systems, you'll also hear other factors that impact diagnosis and care. So socioeconomic status, inadequate insurance coverage, lack of literal access to doctors. So stuff like transportation, proximity to your home or your place of employment, or even availability of your schedule to be able to make an appointment, right? So all of those things are literal barriers to people receiving care or to people even getting a diagnosis. There are many lupus patients that also have other disabilities, other ailments that they're dealing with physically or mentally that can be a barrier that impacts diagnosis and care. Immigration status and language barriers are things that we have to consider as well. And of course, these variables are definitely closely linked to ethnicity and race and occur along those lines. So I want to shift and talk a little bit about specifically the economic impact that lupus has on patients and families. The average annual direct healthcare cost is over $33,000 per year. So annually, direct healthcare costs, medical visits, medications, and things like that can be in excess of, and that's average, right? So that's somewhere in the middle. So people are certainly paying more than that each year. And I've shared that. So I am on Benlysta, which is a biologic, and it is administered intravenously once a month. And my Benlysta infusions are actually $10,000 a month. So for me, the direct healthcare cost is certainly higher than that number. I'm grateful for health insurance as well as the Benlysta patient assistance program. But when you tally up all of the cost of what it takes to go to the doctor, get the medications that I need, it's definitely a lot of money. Another figure is the average annual productivity cost, meaning hours of economic productivity that are lost due to lupus. So job not being able to work, having to take days, not being able to work at all, having to take days off from work, having a late start to leave early and things like that is in excess of $20,000. So that mean annual total cost for people with lupus annually is about $50,000. Also factored into that are indirect costs. So loss of wages. Again, you're not just losing those hours of productivity, depending on what type of job you have, you may also be literally losing wages or having to get childcare or home care. So things that are coming out of your pocket that are not going to be covered by your health insurance or by any other, healthcare account, but that are indirectly caused by the state of your health. I would even venture to include things like meal delivery service. So I really enjoy, cooking, and I've enjoyed like teaching myself how to cook, learning from my mom and my grandmother, but also like Googling recipes and stuff. But it takes a toll on my body. So I actually have a chair that I use sometimes in the kitchen. But sometimes, honestly, it's just easier to order something, which is not always cheap because they tack on all kind of fees, just all kind of stuff. So again, those are like indirect costs, healthcare costs. About 2/3 of lupus patients reported a complete or partial loss of their income due to an inability to work full-time due to complications of lupus. And about 1/3 of lupus patients have been temporarily disabled by the disease. And about 1/4 of lupus patients currently receive disability payments. So those are some statistics, how it impacts not just the bodies of lupus warriors, but also has an impact on our pockets as well. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So actually, that's really all I have for today. But as we conclude, I just want to say, in addition to lupus impacting our bodies and impacting our pockets, it can also impact career and school and overall quality of life. And that's not even getting to the impact on like social and romantic relationships, family, body image, all of that stuff. And then, as I mentioned earlier, for Black lupus patients and other lupus patients of color, you factor in all of those things, plus the medical racism, not having your pain believed, all of those, various factors. And these things can cumulatively or really even individually take an emotional toll on lupus patients as individuals, as well as their families and their communities of care. So because of this, and because May is Mental Health Awareness Month also, next week I'm going to focus the conversation specifically on the ways that lupus affects mental health. And I also spend some time talking about the ways that people can provide support to loved ones with lupus. And I'll share some resources, some links, and some resources to mental health organizations, specifically giving space to organizations that are run by and focus on the mental health and wholeness of Black people. So that is all I have for today. Again, if you have any questions as we wrap up, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll either go back to talk about it or follow up in a comment or what have you. So I do want to just encourage you to stay connected to the Purpletuity Project. Follow us on our social media pages on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you go to any of those sites, all you have to do is type in Purpletuity, and it should just come right on up. So follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, and also on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember that a donation of $20 or more gets you a t-shirt, just like the one that I am wearing. And at the end of this week, those who have already purchased t-shirts, thank you so much. I'm just encouraging folks to take a picture, post it on social media, or text it to me, email it to me, what have you, and we'll get them posted just so we can see, the faces of those who are supporting, and so we can garner other support as well. Visit the website to browse the blog. Again, the blog that talks about race and gender and the blog that talks about the economic impact have some links to articles from those national lupus organizations I talked about, as well as some research, published research that's been done on these topics. The last thing I want to say is that we are doing a yoga session this Saturday, May 29th, with a brother named Ahmed. It's free. All are welcome. Even if you've never done yoga before, if you have never attempted yoga, you can still participate. Again, it's free. We are accepting donations to help offset the cost because we want the brother to get paid, right? So you can go to purpletuity.org/events to get more info, and the registration link is there as well. So let me see if we have any other comments. How do I get a shirt? Okay, I think that was a few minutes ago. That was, yeah, definitely a few minutes ago. So I already answered that question for sure. Thanks. Huge shout out for real to my distribution team, my parents and my sister, who have been holding me down in a major way, making sure that everybody gets the shirts and things like that. So yeah, I hope this information was good. Hope you learned something. Hope that it illuminated some facts and gave you something to think about. And again, reasons to support research, reasons to support organizations like this one or whatever local organizations exist wherever you are, because we need it. We need continued research so we can figure out exactly what's happening scientifically, so we can have better treatments and so people can continue to have relief and live full lives. So I don't think there are any other comments or questions. Of course, if there are some after the fact, definitely feel free to drop them in there or shoot an email, thepurpletuityproject@gmail.com, and we can get those answered there. So let me check. Let me give a couple seconds. All right, y'all. That's it. So thank you again for hanging out with me. Next week, again, we'll talk about mental health and emotional well-being and how to support people with lupus. And I hope to see you next week. Hope you'll share this video on your various platforms. And have a good evening. Have a good Monday.